Welcome to Tita Talks. My name is Sonia Tita Puopolo, and I'm your host. It is a great privilege and pleasure to welcome my friend and New York Times best-selling author, Ken Abraham. Ken is known around the world for his collaborations with popular celebrities and fascinating, high-profile public figures. In fact, he has published 40 books, and his collaborations have been featured on several major TV networks. Over 18 of Ken's books have attained New York Times bestseller status, with several soaring to #1. Ken and I collaborated on Sonia's Ring, 11 Ways to Heal Your Heart. And he worked with Lisa Beamer, widow of United Flight 93 hero Todd Beamer, to create the #1 New York Times bestseller, Let's Roll. Lisa's story of hope in the midst of crisis was incredible, and Sonia's Ring has been transformative to the millions of people we have reached too. In 2009, Ken collaborated with the American Astronaut and Hero Buzz Aldrin and wrote Magnificent Desolation, The Long Journey Home from the Moon. Ken has collaborated many times with Joel Osteen to get his heart on paper, resulting in several #1 New York Times bestsellers, including Your Best Life Now and Become a Better You. Some of Ken's books include, again, New York Times bestseller, A Heart to Serve, with former U.S. Majority Leader Bill Frist, and Knockout Entrepreneur, with two-time world heavyweight boxing champion and entrepreneur George Foreman. When Your Parent Becomes Your Child is Ken's very own personal story of his and his family's journey through dementia with their mom. His heartfelt book provides knowledge, wisdom, and insight. In fact, it helps to promote a better understanding of the disease and difficulties that loved ones experience with Alzheimer's and dementia. Each word in his book is filled with hope and encouragement. And today, we're talking about When Your Parent Becomes Your Child and the healing power of words, a self-care tool for you. Welcome to Tita Talks, Ken.
Tita, it is great to be with you. My. And just as you're going through all that list there, I say, who is that guy? Do I know that person? It's just me. It's just me. I'm just me. I'm just Ken. But thank you for those kind words. Wow.
Well, Ken, I read Ken Abraham gets more heart on paper than any co-writer in America. His books offer genuine hope for people going through the darkest of circumstances. Ken, this is so true, and we agree. What do you think is the one characteristic that allows you to do this? Or is it a combination of ingredients?
It probably is a combination, actually. I'll speak at a writers' conference every once in a while, and I will tell the young writers, I say, to do what I do as a collaborator, which first of all, it means you have to keep your own ideas out of the way and your own ego under control. I'll say, first of all, you have to be a friend to the person you're working with. You know, you and I became such good friends.
Yeah.
All the people I work with, we become friends. Buzz Aldrin, Chuck Norris, whoever it is, we become friends. But you have to be a little bit of a friend. You have to be a little bit of a counselor sometimes, because if you're going to tell somebody else a story, they have to be able to trust you with their heart, trust you with the details of their story. Not everything they tell you goes into the book. You have to be a little bit of a friend, a little bit of a counselor, sometimes a little bit of a pastor, a little bit of a priest, sometimes a little bit of a psychologist, and sometimes even a little bit of a psychiatrist. And if I do all of those things correctly, if I do all of that correctly, then I'll get a chance to put the nouns and the verbs in the right order. If I don't do those things, then we have a magazine article instead of a book. But my role is to work with somebody and really help the reader to understand what makes that person tick. Lisa Beamer, you mentioned Lisa Beamer after 9/11.
Yeah.
I mean, she didn't want to be famous. She just like as you, she was just an ordinary person going through life, and suddenly 9/11 changed her forevermore. She didn't want to be famous, but what made her into the person that she is?
Mm.
That's what I wanted to find out, and that's what I wanted to share with the reader.
Mm. Well, Ken, you've written about how people navigate their life experiences, whether a catastrophic challenges like a 911, alcoholism, Alzheimer's, dementia, cancer, imprisonment, abandonment, pain, suffering, or resiliency and hope and inspiration and motivation and perseverance, stamina, strength, and more. Can you tell us about your journey?
Sure. A friend of mine said, "I don't want you ever to write my book because all you ever write about are all those horrible things that happen to people." And I said, "No, no, no. It's overcoming those things. That's the
Yes.
key." And I learned to be an overcomer early in life. I grew up in a bar. I didn't grow up in a perfect family. My dad was basically an alcoholic, and he owned the bar, and he owned the biggest bar in the county. And I always tell people he was the biggest customer of the biggest bar in the county. But he took me with him to work. I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go with him to work. And this is in Western Pennsylvania. This is not a fancy lounge, that sort of thing. This is a coal miners and factory workers kind of bar
Mm.
where, as the fellows were coming in at 7 o'clock in the morning after working all night in the coal mines, or the other way around, going out to the coal mines at 7 o'clock in the morning, they would come in and stop at my dad's bar. And so I would go with my dad to prepare for opening at 7 o'clock in the morning. But my mom didn't want me to come home early in the morning. She wanted me to stay a little bit with my dad. So I would stay there. And I started writing stories about some of these guys in my dad's bar. And I still remember, Tita, I still remember their names, some of them, Patsy Porto and BC Bianco and Mike Keffins. And they were all such intriguing characters. And the thing I admired about those guys is they had all faced incredible adversity in their life, and yet they had a great attitude. And they taught me as a young boy, it's not what happens to you, but it's how you respond to those things that makes your life either good or bad. And so I learned as at an early age, that's what I wanted to do. And I wanted to tell those stories of people who overcome. Adversity is going to happen to all of us. Tough times are going to come to all of us. We know that.
Yes.
That's life. We know that.
Yeah.
But how you respond to that makes all the difference in the world.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Words have such a tremendous impact on our lives. And what inspired you to write your personal story with when your parent becomes your child?
Now, that was a tough one, I have to admit, because I never expected to write When Your Parent Becomes Your Child. And that whole thing about my mom going through dementia was so
Mm.
strange for me because it's such a weird juxtaposition. I mean, she was the one that put diapers on me, and now I'm putting diapers on my mom. So it was
Mm.
just really emotional and all the rest of that. But I'd read a little book, Tuesdays with Morrie. You remember years ago that book came out, and the writer was just telling what he experienced each day going to visit Maury and the things that Maury shared with him. And so I just started keeping notes like that about my mom. And I thought maybe I would share it with my daughters, maybe with, someday the grandkids or whatever. But
Right.
little by little, it turned into a real book. And I realized, two, first of all, that there was a need. And secondly, that this was our family story. This is my mom had just had an impact on all of our family members.
Mm.
But when she began to suffer with dementia, we took her to the doctor.
Mm.
And he looked at me and he said, "Ken, this is not going to get better." And
Mm.
I thought, who are you to say this is not going to get better? First of all, I believe in God. God could make her better. I
Yes.
believe in my mom's strength. I had seen my mom. She was a concert violinist. She had been sick on her bed, and she literally got up off her bed and went and did the concert and came back home and went back to bed sick as could be. So I knew she was a strong woman, but he was right. He was right. And he walked with us for the next 3 years through that journey of what it was like. But in one of our first meetings, Tina, you'll get a kick out of this because we're book people. He recommended. I asked him, "Well, what is there out there that I should read?" And he recommended this book, and I went and bought it immediately because that's what we do. We're book people. So
Yes.
I went and I bought that book. If you ever have a depressing day, you don't want to read this book. It's terrible. It's
Wow.
awful. It says dementia. This person that you love has dementia and Alzheimer's. It's going to get bad, and then it's going to get worse, and then it's going to get worse and worse. And,
Oh,
and
wow.
and it was true, but it just didn't offer any hope. And so I
Mm.
wanted to write a book that offered hope because my mom was always filled with hope, even in dealing with my dad and overcoming things in our own family. She always had hope. She trusted in God. She pointed us to trust in God, my brothers and me. And
Yes.
so I wanted to write a story of hope. And so it's a funny story in some ways because you have to laugh sometimes. If you're dealing with somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's, you have to laugh or you'll just cry all the time.
Completely. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there were a lot of funny stories in the book I shared with just things that just happened,
Yeah.
and yeah, I remember one of the things that I remember my daughter whenever she first heard my mom. My mom was a saintly woman who played the piano in our church, you
Yes.
know, and after she became a Christian, she just changed. She didn't do all those bad things she did when she was a kid. but but she remembered those words and they were deep down in her mind, you know, and that's one of the things about dementia. Suddenly the filters are gone. And so she knew how to cuss. This woman knew every profane word in the book, some I'd never heard of before. And one of my daughters said, Dad, that doesn't even sound like grandma.
Yeah.
And you know what, Tita? It wasn't. It really wasn't. It was the disease speaking through my mom at that point.
Mm.
And my mom was still there, but something had taken over. She had lost those inhibitors. She had lost that ability to be sensitive and compassionate to other people and not to say those nasty things. And so sometimes words just came out. And so we had to realize, okay, that's what we're dealing with now. That's who she is. But she's still our mom, and we still love her and we still care for her.
Now, according to the Alzheimer's Association, an estimated 5.4 million Americans of all ages have
Yes.
Alzheimer's disease. That is 1 in 8 older Americans dealing with this frightening, heart-wrenching disease. And then more than likely, that includes someone everyone knows
Right.
and loves. What advice can you give to families experiencing this? And what are some ways to express greater compassion and kindness?
First of all, is to recognize what you're dealing with, of course. And I didn't. I have to admit, I didn't. Dementia happened to somebody else. Alzheimer's, I didn't even, I am embarrassed. I didn't even know what Alzheimer's was. I'd heard, of course, the phrase and the Alzheimer's disease, but that didn't happen in our family. Nobody in our family had those kind of things. I
Right.
didn't know anybody with Alzheimer's. So you need to recognize what you're dealing with and some of the signs to look for. And some of those things, of course, memory loss.
Mm.
Memory loss happens with Alzheimer's and dementia. Combativeness many times, where a loved one who has this benign spirit, you know, gentleness, and suddenly they're just boom, boom, boom. They're just arguing about everything. Change the subject. Don't argue, because if you argue, they're just going to get more combative, more angry, and you won't make any headway anyhow. The other thing I found was important for us was physical touch was really, really important for my mom. I think it is for a lot of people. We don't realize some of the elderly people who are in nursing homes and in long-term care facilities, nobody except the medical personnel, nobody ever touches them. Nobody
Hugs them.
hugs them. Yes.
Oh,
And we all need that. We need that. You need that. I need that. We need that
yes.
physical touch. God created us that way. And
Yes.
many people who are in those circumstances, nobody ever comes in and lays a hand on their shoulder or lays a hand on their hand. Now, you have to be careful, and especially with somebody with Alzheimer's, because they lose a bit of their peripheral vision. So you don't come in from behind. You always come in right from the front so they can see you approaching and see your hands approaching, and so they don't get frightened. But
Right.
they need that touch. They need that touch. And we found that was very, very important with my mom, just to have that physical touch. Sometimes I'd hold her hand. Um, I'd go in at night. I would go in and pray with her every night before I left, and I would hold her hand. And it was just a special time between the two of us. The other part I would say to anybody dealing with somebody that has an elderly loved one that you're caring for, or somebody that has Alzheimer's or dementia or anything like that, cancer, some of these other things, is to take care of yourself, because this is a long haul. This is not just a momentary glitch that your loved one is going to get through and be done, and everything's going to go on. For us, it was 5 years, 3 years of intensive kind of dealing with the dementia,
Oh,
but
that-
it's a long haul. Yeah. And so you need to take care of yourself, get rest. Don't be afraid to take a vacation. For the first couple of years, my mom had vacation. I never left town. I stayed right here. I was with her every day. And my wife and I would go visit her. And one of the hardest things was we had to make a decision to put her into a long-term facility, a nursing home.
yes.
Ooh, that just rips your heart out. because I come from an ethnic family just like you do.
Yes.
Our tendency is to take care of our loved ones. You come,
Yes.
yeah, come. We'll make something to eat, of course.
Oh, yes, yes,
You know,
yes.
so our tendency was to have my mom stay here in our home. But
Yes.
you know, my wife and I, we like being married. And if you want to destroy a marriage, one of the quickest ways to do that I know is to bring in somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia, and your spouse doesn't want that to happen, because it does. It takes a toll on you. It really
Oh,
is
yes.
constant. It's like having a baby in your house, and and so I would say be sure and take care of yourself. As far as that person you're dealing with, monitor those medications is really important. I
Yes.
think one of the things that's really important for us, and that was we discovered, just celebrate everything. Celebrate birthdays, celebrate anniversaries, celebrate other people, celebrate the kids, the grandkids, because that loved one still can experience joy. We would have birthday parties for my mom. She didn't know how old she was. She didn't know what day it was. She didn't know if she'd had breakfast this morning or yesterday. So we would celebrate every day, and we'd have parties for any reason at all. I remember taking our first grandchild to my mom, uh, and my mom said, "Oh, she looks just like you." Well, she
Ah,
didn't look anything like me, but it was okay. Just celebrate everything. And
yes.
the other thing we found was spiritual content was so important. My mom played piano in our church. She knew all of those old spiritual songs, knew all those hymns. And Tita, whenever she didn't know what day it was, I would push her up to the piano, and she'd begin playing the piano.
Mm,
And by heart, by my memory, she didn't have any music in front of her, no
right.
words, but those songs were deep down inside her.
Wow.
And they say for somebody that has Alzheimer's or dementia, that
Yes.
music is the last to go. And so if your loved one remembers Frank Sinatra songs, go in. You don't have to sing them in key, just sing them anyhow. Who cares? New
Yes.
York, New York. Yeah, just sing it with gusto, and they will love it and enjoy it. Just all of those kind of things, just to celebrate.
So beautiful. And then I also in your book you gave some advice on diet, on eating,
Yeah.
nutrition. And
Yes.
yes, yes.
And you're
Yeah.
much more of an expert on that than I am. But the truth is, like a Mediterranean style diet, healthy eating, those kind of things, anything you would do to prevent heart disease or diabetes, those are the kinds of things that are helpful in avoiding dementia and Alzheimer's. Now, as I speak, and as we're talking here today, Tita and I, as far as I know, at this very moment, there is still no cure for Alzheimer's disease.
Yes.
The doctors and the medical profession are doing great work. They're
Mm,
trying to find a cure, but at this moment, it's not there. So the best thing you
right.
can do is to live a healthy lifestyle. With,
Right. The preventative practices, the self-care,
yeah,
self-care, the
exactly.
exercise, the nutrition, the
Yes.
rest healing and mindfulness meditation. Yeah.
Yeah. And see, my mom didn't do any of those things. She was, this little lady. She loved to cook. I mean, when we had family meals, when we had
Yeah.
at least, we had turkey, we had chicken, we had steak, we had several different meats. We had all kinds of desserts, bread at every meal, that sort of thing. She
Wow.
did not live and take care of herself in a healthy manner. Now, she was a happy person, I have to admit. She
Yeah.
didn't care, but she didn't exercise a whole lot and those kind of things. And
Mm,
even quite frankly, we noticed near the end of her life, the last 3 years, we noticed that she couldn't follow a storyline. She loved reading. She loved to
mm.
read the Bible. Tita, she worked on all of my books. I think the first 40 books that I wrote or so, she typed. She typed
Yes.
literally, yeah, and put that information into the computer long before I ever started working on computers. She did. But as she grew older, I discovered that she couldn't handle more than one task at a time. We'd say,
Mm,
peel the potatoes, put them in the water, and then put them on the stove. She got stuck at peeled potatoes. Her brain would not allow her to go beyond that. And the
mm.
same thing with stories. We would be watching a movie and she'd get very, very bored quickly. And that was not my mom. She loved stories. Alzheimer's disease, and Alzheimer's is a little different than dementia. Dementia is a type of Alzheimer's, um, or dementia. I'm sorry, Alzheimer's is a type of dementia.
Yes.
Alzheimer's is more of a straight line downhill. When a person starts with Alzheimer's disease, they're not going to come back up. They're going straight down. You hate to
Okay.
say that, but that's the truth. With dementia, you can come down a bit and then stop and level off, and everything looks fine. That happened with my mom. We thought she was fine. And then she fell, had a physical fall, and then suddenly there's this major step down. And sometimes that happens when families have arguments or they get real emotional, and then there's a major step down. And you see that with Alzheimer's and dementia. There's a process. Here's the thing that we forget, Tina. They never come back up. Once they go down, they don't come back up apart from God's healing power. And I believe in that.
Oh,
They,
I believe in that too.
yes,
Absolutely. We believe in miracles, right? We know
right,
miracles happen.
exactly. Yes. But apart from that, an Alzheimer's patient does not come back up. A dementia patient does not come back up. They may level off for a while, but they don't come back up. So at some point, you're going to start seeing that the mom or dad or whoever it is isn't able to handle so many tasks at once. That's a good time to clear out all the clutter
Yes.
in the room so that they don't trip over things and fall, because falls eventually will precipitate worse conditions with Alzheimer's patients and dementia patients. It's also a good time to take pictures down off the wall. You think, let's give mom more pictures. So let's give dad more. No, give them a couple of pictures. Give them a couple of pictures of loved ones. Don't cover the wall. And I made that mistake. I said, well, let's give her every picture we have. You know.
Oh, is that because it overwhelms? It
Yes.
overwhelms
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And
Okay.
keep in mind, I'm not a doctor. These are just things we learned as we went along
Well,
dealing with
yes.
mom as my parent became my child.
Yes.
Yeah, and we discovered, that she couldn't handle all of that stimulation from all the pictures or a lot of noise. My mom was a musician. She loved music, but we discovered that if we turned the music up loud like we used to, that would really bother her. Yeah,
Yes,
she loved it. It was soft music. She loved old hymns. She loved worshipful music and classical music. She loved all of that. But if we turned it up loud, a bombastic kind of song, no, that wasn't going to do well for her. So those are just things we picked up. They were, and truthfully, I didn't know any of this, Tita, whenever I first started dealing with my mom. As I said, we were ignorant. I was totally ignorant. I was living in denial. I didn't think this was something that was going to be a long-term deal for our family, but it was. And here's the marvelous thing. Every day that she lived was a good day. It was hard. It was hard. There were times when I cried. I made a mistake near the end of my mom's life. I made a mistake by wheeling her out in her wheelchair to the doorway whenever I would leave. And it was such a precious time. And because we had been at that nursing home for 3 years, they knew us, they knew me. I pretty much had the run of the place, and they trusted me. So I could take my mom anywhere. I could take her outside down the street. We would go out for ice cream sometimes, But the mistake I made is I put her up to the door whenever I left, because then I said, bye, mom. And she would sit there at that door and do one of these kind of things with her fingers, just waving to me. And I would go outside, Tita, and I would sit in my car and I would literally bawl. And I'm not a weeper, I'm not a crier, but I would sit in my car and just literally bawl. And I said, God, why is she still here? She's 80 some years of age. She's ready to go to heaven. She wants to go to heaven. Why is she still here? And I came to the point where I realized that she was not here for her benefit any longer. She was here for my benefit. There were still things I needed to learn from my mom, and how to live, how to die, how to know that our faith was real, even in the midst of adversity and crisis. She taught me all of those kind of things, not just as a little boy. She taught me those things when she was 88 years of age. And Tita, I'm so glad I had every day with her.
Oh, how beautiful. How beautiful.
Somebody said to me whenever she passed away, they said, and they meant well, and you understand this with your mom. They said, I bet you're relieved now that you have some answers, now that now that there's some closure. And I looked back and I understood what that person said, but I said, I'm not relieved. I was honored to be able to take care of my mom.
Oh, yes. Yes.
She took care of me.
Absolutely.
She went into the valley of the shadow of death to bring me to life. How could I not honor her? The Bible says, honor your mother and your father. It's one of the first things, first commandments with a promise that if you honor your father and your mother, you're going to be blessed. You're going to have a long one. Honor your father and your mother. After she gave everything for me, how could I not give up a little bit for her?
That is so beautiful. That is beautiful. Mm.
Uh, it's just what we lived. It's what we lived. And this book is more personal than any other. I've written now scores of books, and it's been a privilege to work on every one. But this one, you probably find a little bit more of my heart on those pages, because we live these things. And there were funny days. There were days we just laughed and said, "Oh my, I can't believe she said that." There were times when you just have to laugh. My mom, we'd pick her up. We would take her to church with us, and my wife would lay out clothing for her the night before that we would want her to wear on Sunday morning. We go to pick her up, and the clothing was all a mess. It looked like, what are the Abrahams doing, putting that kind of clothing on their mom? But so you just had to laugh. There was no use arguing about it. But so many good times, sad times, yes. But to the very day she died, the morning that she died, it was about 5 o'clock in the morning. That night beforehand, she was still singing. And a group, some friends of ours, like Bill Gaither, that Bill Gaither vocal band, came on the TV. And you may have seen Bill Gaither. He has all these old singers and country music artists and Christian music artists. They do all these videos, and it's great music. Well, my mom knew all those songs. The night that she died, the morning that she died, the night before, they came on singing a song, "Sweet, Sweet Spirit."
Yes.
Mom, she didn't know where she was. She didn't know much of anything else, who was treating her, or, like I said, whether she'd had breakfast that morning or any morning for that point.
Right.
But the moment she heard that music, Tita, she began singing along. She began singing along, "Sweet Holy Spirit, sweet, sweet Spirit." I thought, wow, that's my mom right there. That's my mom.
So beautiful. And I loved your story, how you said it was so, when you said you gave her that kiss, you'd say, "I love you, Mom." And she would say, "Love you."
Yeah.
And when you went to see her back again at 5 o'clock in the morning, at 5 a.m.
Yes.
"I love you, Mom." But yeah, she'd already gone.
She was gone. She had a little saying, though, that she would say quite often, and it was a "never better." No matter what's going on in her life, is, "How you doing, Mom?" "Never better, never better." And ask her, "Minnie, how are you doing today?" It was the same answer: "Never better, never better." And so I closed up the book, "When Your Parent Becomes Your Child." I said, one of these days, I'm going to see my mom in heaven. I believe that with all my heart. I believe you're going to see your mom in heaven. The horrible tragedy. Maybe we'll remember that. Maybe we won't even remember that when we get to heaven. But one thing I do know, when we see our moms in heaven, we're going to go to them and say, "Mom, thank you, Mom, because you helped us to get there. You helped us to get here."
Absolutely.
And I have a feeling when after I have a chance to be with my mom a little bit, I say, "Mom, how you doing? What do you tell me about this place here in heaven? How you feeling, Mom?" I know what I'm going to say, Tita. He's going to say, "Never better."
Never better. I love it.
It'll never be more true than it is right there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They're in just pure love and light. What's your favorite passage in your book?
Oh, wow. I don't know if I can find it real quickly. Let me see.
I'm sure there's many favorite. Every word should be a favorite, but I'm sure there's that one story maybe that maybe we could share.
And I'm not even sure if it's reading it so much as telling it to you.
Okay, yeah, sure.
A passage where we did a thing here at my home where, and remember, my mom at this point could not remember a lot, but she could remember all those old hymns. And so we did a thing. My mom, when she was a young girl, used to go what they called camp meeting, and they would go for 10 days and camp out, and they would have church services and sing and preach and all. So we did a thing here at our house where we invited about 60 or 70 people to come to our house. And this is, you probably can't see it on the screen, but this is a picture of it.
Oh, I love it. Yes. Oh, look at that. Oh, yes.
Now remember, I live in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yes.
We have pretty good singers in our church. We have, one of the girls who came to sing with my mom that night has been with Dolly Parton, has sung around the world with Dolly Parton for years and years. Other people have recording contracts, but my mom is directing them. Now you sing, and she's telling them all this thing. And they would call out songs, and my mom would play them, and it was like old time camp meeting. She would play these songs without music, and she would sing along, and she would sing the harmony part right along with these people. We went not just for few minutes. We went for 1 hour. We went for 2 hours. We went for 3 hours here at the house that night. And it was an
That
old
is amazing.
camp meeting at the Abraham's house. And my mom led the whole thing after she'd had dementia for a couple of years. It was just amazing. Just amazing.
That is amazing. Now, did you videotape any of that?
We did. We taped just a little bit. A friend of ours had an old video camera, and he was just going around and videotaping some parts of it. So it's not in any organized fashion, but he did tape some of it. So we have some parts of it, and it was just a special treat.
So special.
Something I'll remember for the rest of my life, and it was a gift. It really was. She didn't know it, but she was giving us a gift, and she had a time she couldn't remember. So we have we put name tags, and most of these people she had met at one point or another. I teach a class in our church, and my mom used to come in and visit with us, and she would sit in the front row in my class, and she would agree with everything I said, whether it was right or wrong. She would agree. Yeah. So most of the people had met her before, and she had met them, but I knew she couldn't remember them. So we put a name tag on each one. But as they came in, they would all greet her. Oh, Minnie, good to see you. And she would notice their name tag, and she would read their name tag. And of course, I remember Jeff. Of course, I remember Mary. She didn't remember them at all, but it was so much fun. And it was a great. So I told that story in the book, and it's one of my special stories here in this book. It was special to me.
So beautiful. Yes, yes. Wow.
This was something personal to me,
Yes.
and I wanted to honor my mom. But more than that, I wanted to help other people. And Tita, of all the books I've ever written, there have been a bunch, this one has gotten the greatest response. It has gotten the greatest response to me personally. Now, obviously, some of the people I work with, Joel Osteen and Buzz Aldrin and other people, they probably get more response personally. But for me, I've had more people write to me and say, it sounded like you were in our living room. It sounded like you were in our bedroom, our bathroom, helping our loved one because we went through something similar. We didn't know how to deal with it. And I just want the book to be an encouragement, and it has been. So for me, it's been a great blessing. Part of that, I think, is our motivation was to honor our mom and to help her. It wasn't always easy. I'll be the first to tell you, and it wasn't always easy. There were times where you say, I'm going to pull my hair out. Because, and especially somebody whose memory goes early on in the process of Alzheimer's. My brother experienced a little bit of that. My brother lives in Orlando, Florida. So he would come in, and he would only see my mom every 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
And, after a while, she couldn't remember him. After a while, she couldn't remember him because he wasn't there every day. I was there every day. I was with her every day. So she pretty much remembered me to the end. But my brother, I remember the last time he came, he says, I just don't think I can do this anymore. It just tears my heart out every time I come here. And the last time he was here, she didn't know him. And she looked right at him, but she didn't know who he was. That's hard. But
that's hard. Yes.
Yeah. But that happens sometimes with Alzheimer's patients. The other thing that happens that is difficult is when an Alzheimer's or dementia patient becomes belligerent and just gets mean and nasty.
Yes.
I was very fortunate. My mom, that wasn't part of what we dealt with. She could cuss. she knew how to swear.
Yeah.
But she never got really horribly nasty with everybody. But some people experience that, and you just have to remember it is the disease you're dealing with.
Yes.
It's not your loved one that you knew years ago. It's like dealing with a drug addict. Sometimes a person on drugs, and you understand it's a drug that has taken over in this person's life. It's not our nephew that we love so much. It's that drug that's taken over. That's what you're dealing with somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia or some of these other things. The person is still in there, but the person has also experienced some lapses in their brain, and you can study that and find out there are reasons for that and all that sort of thing. They're not thinking the way they used to think. They're not responding the way they used to respond. You have to respond with love, and God will honor you for that. He really will.
Absolutely. And that's that. We're so important to have compassion.
Yeah.
Respond with compassion and kindness.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah. And we can all do that. You say, I don't have enough in me. None of us do. But that's where I believe God comes in. He can give you the love that you need. He can give you the compassion you need and pour it through you to be a blessing to somebody else. And that's really the essence of our faith. He can do that. He can change our normal human lives and give us a touch of the supernatural that we need to function in this crazy world we live in.
where you can tap into that supernatural strength.
Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned that also this was how many years that you had not, this was just your book that you had not collaborated. You said it was the first book that you've
Yes.
written
Yeah.
just, yeah.
You know, most of my books are, with somebody else. That's what I'm known as. I'm known as a collaborator.
Yeah.
Used to be a term they used to use as ghostwriter. People at writers' conferences, they'll ask me, they'll say, "No, Ken, now what's the difference between a collaborator and a ghostwriter?" And I usually
Yes.
tell them it's usually about 3 zeros at the end of the check. Has nothing has nothing else to do with anything. The work is still the same. You're helping somebody else write their story, you know. But this was the first story. This was the first book in more than 20 years that I wrote. This was strictly Ken. This was me telling our story. It was that important to me. I didn't, I didn't rely on anybody else to help me tell the story. I just wanted to get my heart on paper on this one, and our family, and to let them share part of the story with us, because it affected all of us. It wasn't just me. In the early days of dementia, we didn't know what we were dealing with. My mom used to call my brother. My brother worked at a place in Orlando called Full Sail Center for the Recording Arts. It's a university now. And he was a director of admissions there. And she would call him on their toll-free number. She only lived around the block, not even 100 yards away, but she would call him on their 800 number like 10, 20 times a day, every day.
Oh my goodness.
And she wouldn't remember that she called. She wouldn't
Yes.
that she had called him, and see, that was the dementia beginning to creep in. But my brother and his wife, they didn't know it,
They
and so
didn't realize it.
no, so they
Wow.
just thought that my mom was being obstinate and being foolish and truthfully being inconsiderate by calling on a toll-free number that the company was paying for back in those days.
Yes, of course.
And when she was right around the block, but she wasn't. She had already begun to go downhill, and we didn't know. It was the same thing with me. She would call me sometimes 17 times a day, literally
Yes.
17 times a day, with the exact same message. I was so thankful. I mentioned in the book for The Price is Right, Bob Barker and then Drew Carey, whenever they came up, because she always loved The Price is Right, and I knew I could get her off the phone if I just say, "Mom, The Price is Right is coming on," and she would have to run and go watch The Price is Right. But you just have to laugh, because otherwise you cry, because it does, it hurts, but
So
at the same
difficult.
time, yeah, but it was so good too.
Ken, we are currently experiencing the greatest global transformation of our lifetime, and this grand transformation permeates the well-being of every aspect of humankind. Wellness and self-care is at the forefront of this paradigm shift. Have you seen a shift in the meaning and use of words?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and words now have become weapons, and we forget that words have a longer half-life than nuclear waste. When you say something, it is out there, and you can say, "Well, I didn't mean that. I take it back," but it's out there, and that word has a life of its own. And many times our words sear right into somebody else's heart, and somebody else's heart, and maybe you didn't intend to have that effect, but it does. So we need to be more careful than ever before. There are some words that I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. Many of the people that we had ethnic background, various ethnic backgrounds in our little town. We had Polish people, Czechoslovakian people, Italian people. We had just about, it was a United Nations right there in our little town, and people called each other with these words that we would consider them ethnic slurs nowadays. Well, for us to use those same kind of words nowadays, it's just asking for trouble, first of all. But more than that, it's really disrespectful. So it's incumbent upon all of us to find those words to express what we want to say in a way that's going to be uplifting rather than degrading. Personally, and this is a Ken Abraham thing, I don't use profanity. I work with great writers. I work with great authors around the world. Sometimes they want to throw in a bunch of profanity into our books. If you check out Ken Abraham books, you won't find any profanity. I think we used one word in Buzz Aldrin's book, and it was used by somebody else for two reasons. First of all, the profane just goes against what is really good and right and holy. It goes against that. That's what it is. It's profane. Secondly, frankly, it's lazy. It's lazy writing. It's lazy communications. We're too lazy to find a better way to express emphatically what we want to say. And so we throw in a bunch of F words. Well, a bunch of F words really never helped anybody. They never lifted anybody up. They never changed anybody's life for the better. All they do is degrade. So for me, that's a bugaboo. I say, no, I want my words to lift somebody else up. And Tita, one of the things I judge my own life by is in any conversation, whether it's for 5 minutes or for an hour, I'll look back at that conversation later and I'll say, okay, did I help lift that person up, or did I drag that person down?
Oh,
I want to lift people up. That's what my life is about. That's why I'm here, to help lift people up. So yes, there has been a change in the way we use our words. I think it's not an irrevocable change. I think we can make a difference yet to this day by choosing words that are going to lift people up rather than tear people down.
oh, absolutely. How beautiful. How beautiful.
That's just the way I live.
I love it. Our philosophy is that true self-care relies on utilizing 4 pillars of a healthy lifestyle. That's exercise, nutrition, rest, healing, and mindfulness meditation.
Yes.
This is our formula for health, happiness, and longevity. And when these 4 pillars are in alignment, we can achieve harmony and equilibrium. What is your daily wellness routine, and what self-care tools do you use on a daily basis?
Well, those that you mentioned there are precisely the ones that I have almost been forced to bring into my life. Even years ago, when you knew me years ago, I would try to eat right, but yeah, I still like my ice cream, that sort of thing. But so what I've had to do is to change my diet. Because I had a few health issues, had a few heart issues. I ended up having to have a few stents put into my heart and a pacemaker to keep them, because we found out that I, like my mom, had atrial fibrillation in my heart. So I've had to change the way I eat. You know what? At first it was hard, but I discovered I love fruits and vegetables. I always have fruits and vegetables. I love raw vegetables. I don't. I'm from Pennsylvania. We had cows. We like steaks. I've learned to eat things, and truthfully, I've learned to eat even less meat than I used to do before. I still have some, but I don't have nearly what I used to. So I've changed my diet. Exercise, just getting out and walking around the neighborhood. My wife and I will walk a couple of miles around our neighborhood at night. It's just refreshing, and we don't break our necks trying to break a speed limit or anything like that. It's good for me to get out and get my system going. That's what one of the books I did, you mentioned, was with George Foreman. George Foreman had won the world heavyweight championship, boxing championship. Well, then he basically retired, and then he wanted to do a youth center in Houston, but he didn't have enough money to build it by himself. And so he wanted to go out and say, I know a way I can do that. I can box. I can earn money by boxing. And so but unfortunately, George had ballooned up to over 300 and some pounds. So he had to start getting his weight back down. He started it not by this crazy fitness program. He started by walking to the mailbox every day. Walking to the mailbox, then walking a little bit further than the mailbox, walking a little bit further. You have to start small. If you don't start small, you'll get discouraged. So those pillars that you have, and every one of those is so important. Diet and exercise, also our mental thought process is so important. That's important for me. I try to avoid anything negative. Now, you're not going to avoid negativity in our world. We live in a very tough world. So, you're going to hear things you don't want to hear. You're going to see things that are not conducive to living a positive lifestyle. But I don't need to dwell on those things. I choose to dwell on the positive things. One of the greatest books I had a chance to work with was Joel Osteen. His book is Best Life Now. Some people didn't understand. They thought Joel was going to be some theologian. Joel's not a theologian, but he is a practical encourager. And he chooses to live positively. I love working with Joel. We did a number of books together. Your Best Life Now was probably the best known and probably my favorite, quite honestly. But it was just encouraging people to look for the positive rather than the negative. God's put each one of us here for a reason. We're not to live in mediocrity. We're not to live in despair. We all go through tough times, but by taking the right steps, you can overcome those things. And not only can you overcome them for yourself, but you can help somebody else to overcome those things in their lives. So that attitude that Joel has encouraged millions of people now to foster for themselves, that's how I choose to live as well. And for some people, it's meditation. For some people, it's reading the Bible. For some people, it's prayer. I have a friend who prays 1 hour every day. That's a little bit more prayer than I can do. I try, after 10 or 15 minutes, Lord, and bless the people over there and bless them. I run out, but he prays for an hour every day. Okay, great. For me, 15 minutes of prayer makes a difference in my life. It may only be a minute or two of prayer in your life, but it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Those kind of things, meditation, prayer, those kind of things where we really focus in on there's a much greater force in this world than just Ken or Tita. There's a whole lot more going on around us than we even understand sometimes. So those things have all been helpful to me. So thank you for what you do and encourage people along that line, because it is so vital and so helpful to so many people.
And what does the healing power of words, a self-care tool for you on a day, what does this mean to you?
Oh,
The
that is
healing
a
power of
great
words, a
question.
self-care tool for you. What does this mean to you?
I'll tell you, one of the best things I ever discovered for me was the book of Proverbs in the Bible. If you want to learn how to live positively, I encourage you, and here's what I do. There are 31 Proverbs. So what I'll do is I'll take one proverb for whatever day of the month it is. If it's August 5th, I'll do the 5th proverb. If it's September 20th, I do the 20th proverb. Every single day of my life, I read at least one proverb, and it really changes my thought processes and my words.
Yes.
It's a great tool, and it's free, and it's available to anybody. To read one proverb a day. Now, some of them are pretty sticky. Some of them are pretty nasty. Okay, it can tell you that don't go down that road. If you do, you're going to get in trouble. But on the other hand, some of them are very, very positive. Proverbs 31, talking about a great woman, what it means to be an entrepreneur, a woman who takes care of her family, a woman who goes out, has a career, a woman who changes the world in which she lives. Proverbs chapter 31, it's been there for centuries, and we pass it by as if it's useless. Valuable information. Yeah. Proverbs chapter 1, it says, walk with the wise and you'll become wise. Walk with the wise people and you'll become wise. If you hang out with a bunch of duds, guess what? Yeah. So I choose those kind of things. Those kind of words really encourage me. And it's just been a little secret of my life, but it's been a major key to my own success. One proverb every day. Some days I'll read more, but mostly I rarely ever pass a day without reading at least one proverb out of the Bible. There are 31, so you have one for every day of the month. And if you want to do 2 on leap year, you can do that.
Ken, you're an amazing and great inspiration to us. Who and what inspires you?
Oh, well, certainly in different categories of inspiration. I admire great theologians. I admire great writers. Our world has just lost one of the greatest in my estimation. Anyhow, David McCullough passed away recently. David McCullough wrote a book called, of course, he wrote John Adams in 1776, and so many other great books. His book on Paris is one of the best I've ever read. But he wrote a book years ago. He was a Pennsylvania boy, incidentally. He grew up not too far from where I did, in the Pittsburgh area. But he wrote a book called The Johnstown Flood. The Johnstown Flood was a tragedy in Western Pennsylvania where some rich folks from Pittsburgh had a fishing and hunting lodge in a big lake back in the 1800s, 1896 or so. And it began to rain and continue to rain and continue to rain. It was an earthen dam. It wasn't a dam like we have today. They have an earthen dam, and they were getting these warnings. You need to release the water. Johnstown, Pennsylvania was 30 miles or so down the mountain below the dam. Eventually, the pressure got so great, they said, you've got to go down, you've got to send divers down to release the dikes. They tried, the pressure was too great, and all they could do was to sit there and watch the pressure until the place where the dam blew apart above the mountain there, on the mountain, above the city of Johnstown. And then a wall of water more than 30 to 40 feet high raced down the mountain and devastated this town of Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Just horrendous. David McCullough wrote about that story, and he wrote about that story in such a way. He's a historian, a great historian, one of the greatest, I believe, in our country that our country has ever seen. But he wrote about it in such a way that it almost sounded like I was reading a novel. And remember, I grew up not too far from here. I knew Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I knew that story. But when I read it the way David McCullough wrote it, I said, wow, I want to do that. I want to be a writer like that. And so David McCullough, even though he didn't even know me and I didn't know him at that time, he inspired me to do what I do today. And every book I write, I try to write as if it's a novel. So I keep people turning the pages. One of my publishers said, Ken, you're putting in those Hardy Boy endings at the end of the chapter again. I said, yes, I am. And I'm going to continue doing that, because when you get to the end of a chapter of a Ken Abraham book, I want you to turn the next page. Yes. You got to keep going. Somebody told me that, oh, I was reading your book and I was reading it at night and it just put me right to sleep. I said, oh, thanks a lot. No, I want you to turn the page, Tita. I want you to keep going. There's more. Those things have inspired me. David McCullough is a great, from a theological standpoint, there's an old story, and I don't want to take too much of your time, but I'll just tell you about a fellow that most people in the world don't know of, but he has really been a blessing to me, a fellow by the name of Samuel Logan Brengle. Samuel Logan Brengle was a Salvation Army officer back at around the time when William Booth founded the Salvation Army. Wow. And Samuel Logan Brengle, one of the very first places he was assigned by William Booth was down in the basement polishing the shoes of a bunch of drunks and prostitutes that William Booth had brought in off the streets the night before. And Samuel Logan Brengle was a brilliant orator. He had been out in the Midwest part of our country. And Studebaker, the fellow that started the car company, Studebaker Cars, years ago, he had said, stay here and we will build the biggest church that the world has ever known. Well, he said, no, I've got to go to England because there's a fire burning in England. This Booth fellow is helping people and I want to go help people. So he did. But the first place where Booth put him was down in the basement, polishing the shoes of these drunks and the prostitutes. And Booth and Brengle began to say, what am I doing? Did I make a mistake? Am I a fool? Did I make a mistake by coming here? And down in that basement, dark, dank basement, right, God spoke to him. He said, Sam, his name was Samuel Logan Brengle. He said, Sam, you're polishing their shoes. I washed their feet. And Samuel Logan Brengle said, I was never so close to heaven as I was right down there in the basement washing or polishing those shoes of the drunks and the prostitutes. He went to Boston. He went to Boston and opened a Salvation Army. They call them Corps, it'd be a church or whatever you call it nowadays. But he went to Boston and to Danbury, Connecticut. And when he was there one night, he was speaking and a fellow didn't like what he heard Samuel Logan Brengle talking about. And so he threw a brick at him and hit him right in the head. And Samuel Logan Brengle ended up in the hospital for months. Out of that hospital stay, he began to write. And he wrote 7 little books. And he had no idea, this is back in the early part of the 20th century, he had no idea that Ken Abraham was going to read those 7 little books, and those little books were going to change my life. But they did. And one of the things he said, there was a scripture from the Old Testament talking about Joseph when his brothers came to Joseph and they were afraid because now Joseph was one of the most powerful men in the country. And Joseph looked at them and said, don't be afraid. You meant what you did to me. You meant it for evil, but God used it for good. Samuel Logan Brengle's wife took that brick that fellow had hit him in the head with and put him into the hospital for months. She took that brick and she painted on there, God meant it for good. And out of that experience, Samuel Logan Brengle began writing, and he wrote books that have inspired me to this very day. And I'll go back and read all of those books by Samuel Logan Brengle. There was a fellow at Princeton University, I think his name was Asa, somebody I can't recall. He was a professor at the Princeton Theological School, and he used to tell his theological students, yes, you need to read Rudolf Bultmann and you need to read Nietzsche and all these other books, but the man you need to read is Samuel Logan Brengle. Changed my life.
Beautiful. Wow. Science-based evidence shows that the more wellness and self-care tools and techniques you have, and the more positive daily habits you embrace, then the more you not only learn about yourself and about what works best in your life, but the better life you will live. It's about empowering yourself with the skills to live a happier, healthier, and a more harmonious life. I want to share an excerpt from Sonia's Ring, 11 Ways to Heal Your Heart. Physical and spiritual well-being is necessary for life and growth. It is what helps to keep us alive, maintains and nourishes love, faith, hope, perseverance, compassion, and kindness. All of this is available for you, so reach out and grab what is yours. Ken, is there any particular message that you would like to make sure that we communicate and share with our worldwide audience?
Well, it's a simple story. A lady came up to me one night after I'd spoken at her church,
Yeah.
and she was just a little lady. She was not a refined theologian or anything like that, but she said a couple of words to me, and I never forgot. She says, "Ken, God's for real, man. God's for real." Tita, I have never forgotten that little lady. And every time I go through a dark time in my life, every time I have a struggle with adversity or something else, I think, God's for real, man. God's for real. And you know that. You are such a hero to me. I mean, in your life, with what you've experienced and your mom and 9/11 and all that, you could have wallowed in despair for the rest of your life, but you didn't do that. You took what the enemy meant for evil, and you allowed God to turn that around for good in your life so that you can be a blessing to millions of other people. I admire you so much. Thank you for allowing me to share with you today. My pleasure.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for being such an inspiration and a blessing to us all. I am so, so grateful. Thank you for joining us on Tita Talks. For more information, then please go to www.wellnessworldusa.com and www.titatalks.com. And please follow us on Instagram at Wellness World USA, at Tita Talks Official, at We Love Tita Talks, and at Sonia Tita Puopolo. Information about Ken Abraham, www.kenabrahambooks.com. Anything else we need to add, Ken?
I'm out there somewhere. You can't get rid of me. You'll find me with somebody writing somebody's book. I just did a book with Randy Travis. I'm working on a few others right now.
So, and get When Your Parent Becomes Your Child, because it is an extraordinary, extraordinary work.
Thank you, Tita.
Great.
So great to be with you.
It was such a blessing to have you. Thank you so much, Ken.